Yes. Yeah, they call it the overseer effect. Even, I guess, the people who went up on, Jeff Bezos' ride where they cut some of it and then come back down, they experience the same things. It's just, taking the entire world and then looking at it from like a macro perspective where you just have everyone on this blue pill dot, right? It really alters the way you sort of think about humanity and just life on this planet.
So with this launch that you're doing, maybe can you talk us through kind of what is some of the planning associated with it? And then maybe just to whatever degree you're able to share, like what is the payload that's in there? Maybe walk us through the process of what it took to actually build this.
So within these two first launches, they're basically our demonstrators. So we're not really expecting to make a whole lot of money out of it. These are, in the purest word of the term, they're our minimum viable product. The sensors that we're putting on there are, I think, the version 3 of our current sensor stack. We call them Espressos. So these two sensors are very much just testing out two main things. So they're testing out the actual spectroscopy technology that we've been able to build, the actual mechanical hardware. Then the second thing is the actual onboard software that we're building. And that software is, again, sort of going back to that point of how things have just gotten how it has gotten easier to launch these things up into orbit. We're able to play around with a lot of experimental stuff. And for us, it's really that software or that onboard firmware that we're running that really takes a lot of this low-cost hardware that we've been able to manufacture and really derives really good data from it. So it's basically proving that core technology out on these two launches. One's flying on an Indian rocket in October, then the second one's going on the SpaceX Falcon 9. So yeah, those two are our first demonstrator launches. And yeah, once we get these things up in orbit, it'll just really put us in a different league.
Yeah, you'll start to learn a ton. And remind me, I think when we were initially connecting, you were saying that this company that you're launching with in India, this is also their first flight, right?
The hardware itself, it's launched before, but yeah, the company themselves, it's their first time as well. So, but yeah, we're very trusting with them just because the hardware is.
I was going to say it's like two startups jumping off a cliff together. Like, okay, I hope this works.
Exactly. Yeah, at least together we can build one half of the wingspan. So hopefully we can fly something.
There you go. When you think about where you are today, I'd be curious, like maybe how big is your team and what is kind of your ambition over the next like 5 to 10 years as you think about kind of monitoring and where you want to go?
So we currently are around 7 people. So most of the team is, focused on building the tech with my CTO and all of the engineers that we currently have. We see hyperspectral and like climate just being like the first chapter of our story. The 5 plus 10 plus year goal that we currently have is that we want to basically measure the entirety of the physical world. Now, the way we sort of get there, it may need us to launch, hundreds of these satellites, or it may be like we need to go out and completely develop a different type of sensor that complements the stuff that we're already launching. We don't know exactly what it looks like, but we know that is the North Star that we're trying to get to, and that is what will really help us become a multi-billion-dollar company, A, but B, it would really help us really interweave ourselves into daily life and actually make a positive impact in day-to-day operations of just humans in general. So yeah, that's our North Star. That's the vision that we're really trying to build towards over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that'll be fascinating. I don't know if you have this, you're based in Australia, yeah?
We are, yes.
There's in the US, there was this traveling, I think NASA, they shot a lot of this footage. It was called the Infinite. And I don't know if you've heard of this. It's a VR immersive spacewalk experience. Have you heard of this thing?
I definitely have, yeah.
It is one of the coolest things I ever saw. It was actually touring through in Seattle over the last summer. And you walk into this building and it's just a big warehouse, but they make it seem like you're going to go on this space trek. And so you go in there and they have this whole thing. It's like, you're now getting ready to launch and you go in this little holding room and they make all this noise. So it's like you're going on to some rocket thing. And then you go in and they put on these VR headsets. And then you walk into this big open space and anyone that's with you, so we were with some friends in my family, you can kind of see a rough silhouette of people so you don't run into everyone. And then you can go into these little different things and these little pills and like you touch them and they show you little videos of the space station. But then also there'd be times where you could just walk out and then you could do full on spacewalks or fly around the planet. And it was just incredible. And it was such an incredible experience because now granted, I think VR today is, it's still, it's like 8-bit Nintendo, like it works, but
very much.
I can imagine like continuing to watch this, the more we monitor the planet and taking more of those experiences images. And then ultimately this stuff will be like 4K, right? It's going to be really, really good. I think it's something everybody should go experience because you just have a new level of appreciation when you look at the planet as a unified, just a ball that we're all on. And sometimes we forget that, right? There's 8 billion people of us and we forget like, oh, climate, for example, it's China produces more carbon than the US. And I'm always like, where do you think most of your stuff comes from? We're all in this together. And so I just like pictures of the world because it makes you, one, you realize how small you are individually, but then two, you realize that we're just all in this together. And so the more we think about it that way, I think that's super important. And then, did you ever watch the guy, who was the gentleman that was on the space station, the longest guy? And remember, he was the one that was really being very vocal about what he was seeing in the world. What was his name? He's an American.
Kelly. I might be very much wrong.
Yeah, it might have been him. I'm gonna look him up. Scott Kelly.
I think they call it the overseer effect. Even on, I guess, the people who went up on, Jeff Bezos's ride where they like touch some orbit and then come back down, they experience the same things. It's just, taking the entire world and then looking at it from like a macro perspective where you just have everyone on this blue pill dot, right? It really alters the way you sort of think about humanity and just life on this planet.
I'm assuming you've seen those other videos too, where it really makes you feel insignificant, right? It shows Earth and then it zooms out and it shows the sun. And then it zooms out and it shows the next biggest, and then it zooms way out to like the biggest known star we have. And you just get up out of your seat and you're like, I'm nothing.
Exactly.
You feel really small. I mean, what else do you find interesting? I know we kind of talked about kind of the history of space, where we are now, what you're doing. Are there other things that you think anyone watching this might be, interested in?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I really like about, I guess, space or space industry in general, it's like it's not all about exploration, right? Like exploration is a huge core part of it, yes. And that's what really, pushes a lot of core technologies forward. But a lot of it is just beyond, trying to get to Mars. It's beyond just building that interplanetary goal that everyone tries to go after, that's entire sci-fi goal. It, especially in the work that we're doing, and I guess, companies like ours are doing, whether it be directly in Earth observation or in like tangential industries, it's making a whole lot of positive impact for people who are living down here. And I think that's just not emphasized enough. People look at a satellite imagery and they're like, yeah, cool, but they don't really sort of realize like the back end that needs to go into it to sort of get in there. And then, of course, there's a lot of bashing that still goes on around people wanting to go to Mars and whatnot. So yeah, that's probably where, a lot of, I guess, our works and our emphasis goes into. It's just like, hey, it's much more than just, that exploration side of things. It's a lot to do with our day-to-day lives here on Earth. And, that the same technology that's being used to build and launch people up there is also being built and launched to actually solve problems back at home. Because yeah, that's a really go-to argument is like, why don't we solve Earth's problems first? And yeah, we are doing that with the same technologies that are being used to send people further out.
Yeah, I think one of the things, I know the ambitions of Elon Musk. I mean, the reason we're doing all this to support our planet is one thing, is you have to make this economically viable to support such a major undertaking. And so we're doing a lot to support the planet, even like, Starlink and all that. That's just bringing internet to places all over the place that are it's helping humanity. And so that's an awesome thing. At the end of the day, too, we can also point it the other direction. We can also point it out into space, right? We can leverage that as kind of a stepping stone for Mars and other places we want. And so I think my assumption, and again, I'm not as close to this as everyone else, but, I think once we can start building stuff out in space, maybe the moon, we can start doing a lot of other interesting things, because it just, to get out of our atmosphere, it's like a gigantic kind of suction cup, right? You got to that just costs a lot to get out there. But if we could start to manufacture things out in space, it becomes a lot cheaper. There was an episode I shot a few weeks ago. Somebody was talking about, it was contacts or something. There's a bunch of these weird manufacturing things on Earth. They're like, oh, it's much cheaper if we do this in space. And it just like, you're like, why? And like, there's all these reasons for like the effects of gravity and stuff. And I'm like, wow, I just never even thought about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. There's like companies like Warda Space and like Space Forge and all these guys, like we can basically build in space factories. Going back to my university days, we did a lot of research that could only be done in like microgravity. So we had to basically, fly these experiments like really high altitude and then basically let the plane fall a little bit so it simulates zero gravity. That is just super important in doing a whole lot of like biological experiments. I think again, going back to Warda, they're doing like a launch in a few months where they're launching pharmaceutical equipment up into orbit. So that's fairly exciting there. Our company doesn't necessarily need stuff up there, but of course, if we build our sensors up in orbit, then that's an entire cost component gone out of the window. It's just we just have a factory just pumping these things out as they sort of get the end of their lifetime. So yeah, looking forward to seeing that day.
What do you think about, on a more personal level, of if you ever had the option to either one, go out and land on the moon? Let's say that happens in some time in your lifetime, or even venture to Mars. Would you be an early adopter on that, or are you going to wait for a while?
Every time I think about it, it's like, so I do get homesick a lot. So I feel like I do not see myself going up into space just yet. It's definitely something maybe later down the line I might think about, but for now it's like I'm a homebody or an Earth body, if you would.
You need mom's cooking. You can't survive on MREs, some space food for too long.
Yeah, definitely. I really do not want to be looking at Tetra Paks all day.
No. That sounds terrible. Trying to think of anything else. We definitely touched on a lot of really interesting points. When did you say you were launching your satellite again?
Yeah, we're launching our first one in October, and the second one's going up in January.
Yeah, very cool. And if people wanted to learn more about and kind of follow, do they just go to your website? What's the best way to kind of follow what you're doing?
Yeah, our website and our LinkedIn are probably the best ways. We're trying to have a bigger audience on Twitter, but yeah, like LinkedIn is probably where basically update things live as they happen.
Yes, for anyone that's watching, it's just espersatellites.co. So that's ESPER satellites with an S.co.